Hello and welcome to this lecture on qualitative methods, interviews. After this lecture, students will be able to understand the uses of qualitative interviews, identify the differences between qualitative and structured interviews, and explore the strengths and weaknesses of qualitative interviews. Qualitative interviews are a method of collecting data in which the interviewer adapts or modifies the interview for each interviewee using semi-structured or unstructured interviews. This is in contrast with more structured approaches we see in surveys and self-report questionnaires. Qualitative interviewing requires the interviewer to develop a rapport with the respondents and learn to read their verbal as well as their nonverbal responses and cues. Qualitative interviews are often used in conjunction with other methods, including more structured surveys and observational methods. Interviews typically use open-ended questions, and there are a number of different types of interviews. We can have semi-structured interviews, where the interviewer has a general structure for the interview, but is free to deviate it or adapt it as necessary. Usually this has an interview guide with a list of questions and topics that are to be addressed. Unstructured interviews have a looser set of goals in mind, but are more free form in how they ask questions, so there's a lot more adaptability in what gets talked about as well as how it gets talked about. We also have life story interviews, which are a short account of the life of the respondent, done in collaboration with the interviewer. And we can also have group interviews or focus groups. This is a technique in which the interview works with two or more interviewees or respondents at the same time around a particular topic. Focus groups tend to focus more on participant-to-participant interaction with only minimal moderation from the interviewer, while group interviews include more interviewer-interviewee interactions and are more focused around the questions that the interview is asking the respondents. Interviews take a lot of work, but they tend to provide good in-depth information and good internal validity. They can be very expensive to do and time-consuming, particularly when you're doing more in-depth interviews. This can lead to really time-consuming process where you have to interview someone, then transcribe that interview. And this generally means that you're going to want smaller sample sizes, and because of that smaller sample sizes, you're generally going to have lower external validity or lower generalizability. Typically with interviews, you also don't do any sort of probability or random sampling. Reliability with interviews can also be of concern if we are not consistent in our questions and methods from interview to interview. Using the semi-structured or unstructured interview gives us flexibility, but also makes it hard to compare and be consistent from interviewee to interviewee. As always, with any sort of research that involves human subjects, we need to get informed consent. And finally, we have to worry about something called the interviewer effect. Remember that just like surveys, the presence of the interviewer is going to change the respondent's behavior in potentially unpredictable ways, based on how the interviewer acts and what the interviewer says. In addition, who the interviewer is will also affect how respondents behave, and respondents in general are going to seek social desirability and to make the interviewer happy, and in general try to gauge the responses based on what they think the interviewer will like. When it comes to analyzing interview data, it can be a little tricky. Interviews are usually recorded in some fashion through audio, visual, or written formats. However, this means that these interviews must then be transcribed, put into a written format if they are not already, and then coded or categorized before any sort of analysis can take place. Transcription in this way can be incredibly lengthy and difficult and tedious, and the transcriber must make sure that the conversation is recorded word for word, including all those ums, uhs, etc. Coding here is the process of categorizing or organizing interview responses for analysis. Usually codes are around a particular topic or analytical theme. Alright, that is all for this lecture. Thank you for watching.